Performance Max can work for lead generation. However, you need to understand how it works and give it the right signals. If you set it up incorrectly so that it tracks every possible event on the website, if you don't have some protection against spam, you're likely to get a lot more conversions in your dashboard, but very few actual leads for your business. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up PMAX campaigns so that they generate more high-quality leads for your business and how to avoid some of the common pitfalls we've seen with many clients. For context, here at No Hassle Digital, we manage Google Ads for more than 500 clients across service-based, e-commerce, B2B, and many other categories. So everything in this video is based on the actual patterns we see in real accounts. So before we go into specifics and before we go into tactics, it's important to understand how PMAX actually works. What's in the backend of PMAX and why it works so well for e-commerce, and you'll oftentimes hear it doesn't work so good for lead gen. So PMAX is actually a combination of all Google's inventory. So Google has Google Search, it has YouTube, it has a ton of different websites that can show ads that Google doesn't actually own, and that's one of the key things to understand with PMAX. Then there's Gmail and all other platforms. So as you know, Google has very sophisticated technology, and what they try to do with PMAX is something like this. So they know you're out there looking to buy a product even though you're not actively searching for that product on Google Search. So Google is like, okay, let's combine all that inventory in one campaign. Let's give it a lot more signals. And with that additional information, it could bring better results. And PMAX does a great job for e-commerce, but then the question is why it doesn't do such a good job for lead generation accounts. And here's why. Part of PMAX and where it can show the ads is display network and all other places that Google doesn't actually own. So all other websites that show display ads, Google doesn't actually own. All applications that show our ads, Google doesn't actually own them. So those people who own that inventory, they're actually incentivized to scam the system and try to simulate clicks and send traffic to your website. And the way they do that is very sophisticated, and Google is battling against that, but things are coming through. And even more importantly, spam has become so sophisticated that they're even able to simulate a conversion. So a sophisticated script nowadays can easily simulate a form submission. A more sophisticated script can easily simulate a phone call. And when you feed those information, when those conversions are not set up properly, then Google Ads account sees conversions. If the form on your website is set up so that it can be easily penetrated, then that's a problem. That's the key reason PMAX doesn't work as well. And that's the key reason why you need to have tracking in a very, very good place if you want to be good with lead gen. Because on e-commerce, a conversion is a sale. So no bot will actually simulate a sale and spend its own money just to get a fraction of that click. So with lead gen, that doesn't happen. And that's why we need to be super careful with PMAX for lead gen. So with PMAX for lead gen, we need to ensure that the tracking is squeaky clean. We need to ensure that common conversions for lead gen, such as phone calls and form submissions, are not easily faked. And here's what I mean by that. For phone calls, you want to make sure that they last long enough, and we'll go into details on that. For form submissions, you want to ensure that you have reCAPTCHA on your forms. You want to ensure that you have more than just first name and last name. Forms on your website need to be sophisticated if you want PMAX to work properly. So in your forms, you want to ask for as much information as needed to really qualify the leads. So the key is to make it very difficult for spam, for bots to simulate form submissions and to simulate conversions on PMAX. And before we continue with the second step, where we'll go into more details and elaborate on what are some of the specifics you can do with PMAX for lead gen, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Step 2, choosing the right bidding strategy and right account structure. So there are a lot of ways to organize PMAX campaigns, and there are a lot of ways to organize bidding depending on the account maturity, depending on the business side. But as a general rule, if you're just getting started with lead gen for PMAX, and if you have just a handful of services that you promote, start with one campaign and have everything in a single campaign. 1 or 2 campaigns will get the job done. And if what you're promoting is relatively similar, and then you can have different asset groups for each service that you want to promote. Let's say that you have several services, relatively similar value, have them in a single campaign to make learning a bit faster and to consolidate everything in a single campaign. When it comes to bidding strategy, there's so many ways you can go about this, again, depending on the account size, depending on your business. And for the purposes of this video, it would be very difficult to go into nuances of everything. But as a general rule, start with optimizing for conversions and don't use target CPA to start with. Give campaign a bit more freedom to run, keep an eye on it closely. You want to give Google enough room so that it can start optimizing, but if you pay close attention to the actual metrics, you'll be on top of it and you'll prevent it from spending a ton. Also, when it comes to bidding strategies, I would strongly recommend not using the option to bid only on new customers. There are options for that exist in Google Ads interface. They're not as sophisticated. Just don't use them. Instruct Google to go after all customers and you'll evaluate them later. Step 3 is campaign level optimization. So things you can do on the campaign level to improve the chances of success. One of the things you can do is apply demographic targeting. So if you know that your audience is of certain size and that one gender is more likely to convert than the other, you can use that to make changes on the campaign level. Now, in practice, I typically don't use this when I'm just getting started, but there are of course examples when you simply know that your audience is not of certain age and you want to apply that right away. Another thing you want to do on the campaign level is apply exclusions. So you want to separate brand from non-brand, so make sure to exclude all brand keywords on the campaign level and make sure to exclude all first-party data on the campaign level. What does that mean? Have a customer list in your account if you have one, and make sure to exclude all additional first-party audiences. That will give you a good start when it comes to campaign level optimizations you can do. Step 4. Building audience signals and search themes. These are the settings that you set on the asset group level. So as mentioned previously, if you have multiple services that you're going to promote, you'll have one asset group for each of those. So within each asset group, you have the option to set up audience signals, you have option to set up search themes. Here's how you go about those. You want to add as many search themes as possible, and you want to look at these as keywords. They're very similar to keywords, and there's a good chance that those search themes that you set in your campaign settings are going to be shown in search terms when you review them later on. Another thing you want to set up are audience signals. So make sure to choose the right audience signals for your business. Make sure to go into details on these and do a bit of a research, scroll through the list and find the right ones. So unlike e-commerce settings for PMAX, where you typically don't need to go into so much detail on search themes, you don't need to go into so much detail on audience signals, you just let the feed do its work. With lead gen, you want to provide as much info as possible to give Google good starting initial signals it can use for further optimization. Step 5 is about creating high quality assets for your campaign. As a general rule, when it comes to PMAX for lead gen, you can apply a rule that says more is better. As a very, very general rule. There are specifics for different types of businesses, but if you just apply that, you'll be in decent shape. Now, let's go into details. As an example, when it comes to ads, when it comes to headlines, descriptions, and more, there are options to add 15 headlines, and ideally, you want to have everything, but make sure they're different. If you're just going to provide 3 different headlines in 5 different variations so that it turns out you have 15, it won't cut it. So make sure there's a variety, make sure you have calls to action, make sure you have some features, make sure you have some benefits, a call to action that's specific to your industry or something that's very specific to your business. So make sure there's a variety in that. When it comes to images, you want to use what you have on your website. That will typically do the job. Something you have on your social media accounts, that will also do the job. If your website is in decent shape, you probably won't have to create new ones from scratch. But if you do, you can also use Google's built-in AI image creator to do some really decent work when it comes to imagery. Part of PMAX is also a video. So if you have some videos, make sure to upload them. If you don't have one, Google might create one for you based on the assets you previously provide. So there's an option to disable that. Finally, when it comes to other asset types such as site links, call out extensions, call extensions, and more, again, rule is more is better, and everything that makes sense for your business should be added as an asset. Step 6 is about controlling where you actually send the traffic and preventing wasted ad spend. So there is an option in PMAX to enable your expansion. You want to have that option excluded, because when that option is enabled, and it is enabled by default, and what it will do is allow Google to send traffic to other pages on your website. And you don't want to do that. You have your main landing page. You want to have all your traffic being sent to that main landing page. So what we see all the time is that a website would have a blog, and blog is typically very content rich with a lot of keywords. So PMAX will start sending traffic to those pages thinking that is relevant and the right thing to do. However, those pages don't really have calls to action, and that traffic typically results in wasted ad spend. So have that option excluded, at least to start with. You can enable it later. Another thing is having negative keywords in PMAX and adding them right away, adding them as soon as possible, starting with something that would be, kind of common sense for your business. Make sure to exclude brand, and previously we talked about adding brand exclusions. Now we want to have brand as a negative keywords on top of that to make sure this is cemented. So those two things will prevent Google from sending traffic to improper pages and from showing on irrelevant searches, therefore saving your budget. And when it comes to location targeting, there are two options to take into account very seriously. One is the option to show ads to people who are physically in the area that you're targeting, and you want to use that option. That is not a default option. Default option is people in or interested in location. So there's a nuance between the two, but you want to play it safe. You want to make sure that you're targeting people who are physically in your location. And of course, there are exceptions, but as a general rule, have that option included. And there's one more thing, even more important than this, and that is exclude other locations and other countries, even though you're not actively targeting them. You might be asking, well, why would I want to exclude something that I'm not targeting? It doesn't make sense. And the reason is what I've talked about at the beginning of the video when it comes to spam and dealing with spam. And this is simply a flaw in Google system. And it seems like some, malicious actors are able to penetrate their systems and send spam traffic from other countries. We've had examples where clients would be coming to us and say, hey, we're getting traffic from some African country, we're getting traffic from Asia, and they want to target New Orleans. Once we looked into their Google Analytics, because you won't be able to see that in Google Ads, we would actually see traffic coming from other countries. Now, this is a flaw, this is a bug in Google's own system. Google is probably going to prevent this from happening at some point, but for the time being, if you're not going to exclude some locations upfront, like we do on our end, we would typically exclude a lot of countries right from the start, maybe all other states and so on. We would really cement this to only location that we target. But if you don't want to take it that far, make sure you keep an eye on Google Analytics and analyze where traffic is coming from exactly. Take a look at country report. You're seeing a lot of traffic coming from some other countries. And if you do, then you might want to block them at that point. Final step. Monitoring performance and lead quality with PMAX for lead generation. So you've applied the settings we talked about previously and you launched your first campaign. Here are two things you want to keep an eye on throughout the whole period. First thing, is the channel report. You want to see where traffic is coming from. And this is a new report that's been released a couple months ago, so a lot of people don't even know about it. But this tells you where traffic comes from. Is it from Google search? Is it from display? Is it from YouTube? Or from some other part of Google's inventory? And that will tell you a lot about lead quality. So as an example, if you're getting low quality leads, but a lot of your traffic comes from display, that may be the reason. And in that case, you might want to do something around images or video that you have in your PMAX campaign. So keeping an eye on channel performance report is crucial. Another thing, even more important than this, is keeping an eye on lead quality. Once again, PMAX tends to give you low quality leads. It tends to give you spam leads unless you apply things we talked about previously. Regardless, you want to keep a close eye on the lead quality and see what are the calls that are coming through. What are form submissions like? Are people replying to your emails? Somebody submits a form, you try to call them back. Are they actually picking up the phone? Do emails look legit? Do names look legit? And that is everything that falls under lead quality. Over time, as you continue optimizing, you'll start noticing patterns and you'll start noticing that, hey, higher quality leads may be coming through phone calls. And then in that case, you want to increase the threshold of a phone call. So by default, in order for phone call to be counted as a conversion, it needs to last at least 30 seconds. You want to increase that to 60, maybe even 90, or even more than that. And in some cases, we see examples where call duration was like 10 seconds. That really doesn't cut it. So the bottom line is, if you notice something is working, double down on that. If you notice that calls are great, start increasing the threshold of how long a call needs to last in order to be counted as a conversion. And that means giving Google feedback. Then Google learns, okay, I'm not going to optimize only for phone calls, but I'm going to optimize for longer and longer and longer phone calls. And that will over time make a difference. On the other hand, if your form on the website has a lot of qualification questions and that really gets the job done, you're qualifying leads really, really well, then, double down on that and increase that, add more questions, ask more details, ask them for blood type, I don't know. And then over time, this will improve as well. Finally, you might want to implement some anti-spam techniques such as reCAPTCHA fields, honeypot fields, email verifications, and more to protect your campaign and your account from spam traffic, because there's a high risk of that with PMAX. So if you take anything from this video when it comes to PMAX for lead generation, it is this. You want to ensure that your tracking is very, very tight and that you're not allowing Google to slip false, fake spam conversions, whether it's through poor conversion tracking or your campaign not having location targeting set up properly, or something else we mentioned in the video. With PMAX for lead gen, it's more about preventing Google from robbing you than anything else. It really comes down to eliminating every option Google can take to waste your budget. Once those things are in place, you're more likely to have a high-performing PMAX campaign. You need to ensure that Google is not going to waste your budget on placements that are not good placements, by providing you conversions that are not really strong conversions. And it really comes down to protecting your account from different ways PMAX can waste your budget.